Moeletsi Mbeki is a South African political analyst. He is also a brother to the country's former president, Thabo Mbeki. Mr. Mbeki, it's lovely to have you here with us.
Great to be here.
We're hearing the South African president condemning the attacks on foreign nationals in South Africa, something that made headlines across the continent. You recently wrote an opinion piece, and you said it comes down to, you called it, directionless political elite. Elaborate on that.
Well, what I was referring to was in our relations, policy relations between South Africa and the rest of Africa. The political elite, which include the president,
right,
you have just seen, they really have no direction as to what kind of relationship they want South Africa to have with the rest of Africa. So a whole lot of issues that should be managed properly, like immigration, like
exactly,
the borders, are not managed properly because of this lack of direction.
Right.
They are not very clear about what South Africa's national interests are and how they should protect them. So that's what I meant by the lack of direction.
Okay, so speaking of the political elite, you became a very critical or you were very critical of the ANC post your brother's presidency under Jacob Zuma. And I think I recall you actually saying or questioning the relevance of the ANC South African politics. I wonder what your thinking is today. Do you think the ANC is still a relevant party to take South Africa forward? And if not, what is the alternative?
Well, the ANC is like many other liberation movements in Africa. They fought against colonialism and against apartheid.
Right.
But they are not very good at governing the country afterwards. And they are no different from other liberation movements in the rest of the continent, in Ghana, in Zambia, in Tanzania, Kenya, and so on. So this is one of the problems we have, not just in South Africa, but in Africa as a whole, is that the liberation parties don't have a clear agenda on how to change the economic system that the colonialists put in place.
Right.
And that's what's at the bottom of the problem that we have.
Okay, so I hear you. But do we also not have a problem on the continent where the electorate lacks an opposition fallback? And in the case of South Africa, if you are talking to a black South African, if it's not the ANC, who should they vote for?
Well, there are 200 registered political parties in South No. So they are at liberty to vote for any one of those 200 political parties.
But doesn't it speak upon that there is no real credible opposition? I mean, just recently in South Africa, there have been issues with the main opposition party, elements of racism, senior black figures leaving the party, insinuating that racism was behind all of that. Doesn't it just goes to show that in as much as we criticize the liberation movements, there are really little alternatives for people to choose from?
I don't think that's correct. If you look, for example, at Zimbabwe or Zambia, let me give a better example of Zambia. The opposition party, a movement for multi-party democracy, was set up in Zambia mainly by the trade unions, but by other players. It won an open election, and it defeated the long-serving President Kaunda.
Sure.
So it's not correct to say there are no opposition parties in Africa. They are.
I must interrupt you here because there's one thing I want to get at. We still talk about South Africa being one of the world's most unequal societies today. Quickly, do you think that taking land from white people and giving it to black people is the only way to address those inequalities?
No, definitely it won't address the inequalities of South Africa. Taking land from A and giving it to B is not a solution to South Africa's inequality. We can spend forever, you and me here, discussing the economic history and the political history of South Africa. But South Africa is a capitalist society. And in a capitalist society, small groups of capitalists, whether they are black or white, own land, own means of production. 1% of the English population own all the land in England. If you distributed that land to the 70 million English people, you'll get a little garden here, a little garden there, and that will not be a solution to your agriculture.